lived in the UK.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm American, I guess you could say.
So let's you and I had a little chat yesterday, and it was fun. I enjoyed our little chat. So let's go back to the beginning, like I always do.
Sounds good.
Where did you originally come from or grow up?
I was born in Wales, and then the family moved to London when I was about 10 or 11 years old, maybe 10 years old. And so then I grew up in London, sort of the equivalent of high school, I guess, middle school, high school. I went in London, and so changed from a Welsh guy to more of a Londoner. And then I was in there. I lived till I was about around 30 years old, and well, maybe a little bit more, early 30s even. And then I emigrated to the USA.
Wow.
So I've got a foot in Wales, I've got a foot in the UK, and now I've got 2 feet in the USA.
So growing up, what were you listening to? What kind of music were you listening to growing up?
I had an elder brother, and so right from, I'd say 53, the first 52, the first thing I remember, I was 5 or 6. He had Johnny Ray, the single Johnny Ray Cry, which was a big #1 worldwide hit. And it's pretty edgy for the time. And so he had that single. He was listening to that. And he had a Mario Lanza record as well, which he didn't particularly like, but he must have got it for Christmas or something, because Mario Lanza was a very popular pop singer back then. And so he preferred Johnny Ray. So that was the first music I remember sort of listening to intensively, because he would play over and over again. And I would be his younger brother just hanging around. And then Bill Haley hit the UK. And that was a big explosion of rock and roll. And so my early days were listening to rock and roll, and then that graduated into Little Richard, Fats Domino, rock and roll, Chuck Berry, that rock and roll that was closer to the blues, I guess, and more black oriented music. So that was the 50s. My brother was also into doo-wop and all sorts of things. So I kind of I absorbed that, along the way too.
That's great. So your first band, the first band you were in, what was the name of the first band? Was it Savoy Brown?
Savoy Brown, yeah.
And the first album, you and I were talking about that yesterday, how that's a special album to you, the very first album.
Well, I think so, because the very first lineup was excellent, and I had really the nucleus of the band was myself and I would say John O'Leary, who was the harmonica player. We met, we were friends, we lived in Wandsworth, the same area of London. And he was a blues guy and I was a blues guy, and we'd have record sessions, and and we went from there to form Savoy Brown. John, then we started playing and doing well, or at least getting lots of gigs. And but then John left, and we recorded some singles for Mike Vernon. He had a label called Purdar Records. We recorded some singles for his label, and then then John left after the singles. So then I had to reconstruct the band. And so the second lineup then went into the studio to record our first album. But of course, I always have a very soft spot for that first band, because when John left, it put me into a different situation. I was a band leader, but didn't know it. And then when John left, I was the band leader for sure, because now I had to, had to bring another member in and, organize the music accordingly. So the first band has a soft spot for me because I'm not sure. I would like to know what I would have been, had fate gone a different direction. As soon as the band changed personnel, it kept changing personnel.
Yeah.
I suppose every band does, to a degree.
Well, let's go back to the first record, and you had a vocalist that was special for the time. You had a black man singing in your band in the beginning, Bryce.
Yeah, Bryce Porteous was singing, and then the drummer Leo, who was a very good friend of mine from the same area of Wandsworth, Leo Mannins, was also black, and so it was the first UK band that was integrated. You had Geno Washington, you had some, you had other people around, but this was a totally UK band. There was no American influence or anything in terms of where people were from. So, and I didn't realize that until maybe a couple of years ago when someone said that fact. So, it's pretty groundbreaking. I guess it didn't register with me because Leo, of course, was a friend of mine, and Bryce was the right kind of person we needed to be the singer because he was very he was very into dancing, and he could sell the band, and that's, I suppose, essentially what a lead singer does is he's the face of the band.
So yeah, I played I Ain't Superstitious from that record just before we did the interview here, just so you know that. I went all the way back to the first record.
I know, that's such a the first record was it's well, when you were mentioning those records, it's like Hellbound Train, 1971. Oh my goodness, the time seems like it seems in the dark ages there, and it was a long time ago, and it was the 60s and the early 70s were great times. I think before the music got overly commercialized, as we went through the 70s, and it became more theatrical and all those things, which and more business-like, really, I guess. But during the 60s and in the early 70s, we had caught, my generation had caught the music business by surprise. And it was great because coming into the business, of course, the ground had been laid, by the Beatles and people like that, the Stones already for me. But so by the time I came in, we could call our own shots. The record label was sort of saying, yeah, do what you want. There's none of that old time thing where, well, we'll make a single and then we'll make another single. Actually, the things that happened to the Beatles, when Beatles, I think, made Rubber Soul and all those fairly heavy albums, mid-60s, it sort of set the stage for, even though I was playing blues, it set the stage for us as a band to be creative, and the record labels let us do our thing.
And then during that time, there were a lot of bands you were in competition with to get gigs, I bet, during that time.
Yes, I quickly established the band in 67. There was a big the British blues explosion, I would say, was 68. So, by 67, I was headlining at the Marquee, which was the, premier place to play. And so then a lot of the acts that came along that eclipsed me and Savoy Brown actually opened for us because we had established our own blues night at the Marquee, so that I don't know how often we'd play them, at least once a month. And I can't even remember the day as it was, but it was blues night. And so Jethro Tull, 10 years after, were opening acts. Of course, we could hardly follow those kind of acts. It was tough. It's all very well, being established at that point in time, but it was hard, playing after Alvin Lee for sure. And so yeah, there was 10 years after there was Jethro Tull, of course. There was Drum Mayo. He was always there. He was leading the way, really, for people like myself. There was trying to think of all the other.
Fleetwood Mac was around at the time.
Mac was my time period. Yes, Fleetwood Mac came along, and Fleetwood Mac, Chicken Shack, of course, and there was a Send Up record that was quite popular in the UK at the time. It was I've got the Fleetwood Mac, Jethro Tull, Savoy Brown, Chicken Shack Blues, was the title. And that was a punchline, And we had the Yardbirds, we had the Stones, we had the Animals, how could you top those bands? They sort of started the whole thing. They were called rhythm and blues bands at the time. And so when I came along with Fleetwood Mac, Chicken Shack, it suddenly became, just blues. We were blues acts. We were very, I don't include John Mayall in that because he was a law unto himself, even by then, with Eric Clapton and so forth. But it was a grand old time.
I bet. Listeners have been texting me questions for you, so I have one for you that's kind of close to that. He says you opened for Cream one time. Was that?
Yeah, that was Cream's. I believe that was Cream's first London date. It was a small venue, and I was the opening act. And really, it was, I suppose, the coming out show for Savoy Brown, I guess. And a lot of people were there. Mayall was there. Peter Green was there because they both spoke to me that night. I remember that, and so I had to have been. It was 1966. So, I was 19 years old or something. So, but a very young 19 years old, a very young 19-year-old guy. And so we opened. And the astonishing thing was, it was a small venue. All the venues were small. If you saw the venue that we played that night, I mean, people wouldn't believe it, but of course, that was 1966. Cream already had the reputation. You could read about them in the papers. They were the cream of the musicians, at that time point. So I guess that's why they call themselves Cream. But anyway, the stage was too small for me to put my guitar amp up, let alone drums. And so they very kindly let us use their whole equipment for the show, which was, astonishingly nice of them, And we used. I used to start the show off with "Dust My Broom," and we'd come on like gangbusters, and as today, my favorite key is A. So I'd play everything in the key of A. And I remember that night, John Mayall saying to me, I don't think I'd ever met him before. He said, "You're playing everything in the key of A, change the key up." So I was like, I gotta play in different keys. I thought A was the blues key.
So the second part of the question is, was that before Cream released Fresh Cream, before their first album? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. It was before the first album. Yeah, they were just playing dates then, Yeah.
Just after Eric left Mayall, I take it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I saw one of the very first dates that John had done with Eric Clapton. And then from that point on, I followed the band all around London. They were playing everywhere in London. So I would follow the band. I saw countless shows with them because Eric was just astoundingly good. And I had seen Eric with the Yardbirds, of course, and I was a fan from that point as well. But then when he went with John Mayall, there was this like, whoa, what's going on here? You know, this is great. There was a time after that, I think he left John Mayall, and I don't know what happened. By then, I think I must have been playing as well, so I was absorbed in what I was doing. And then I read in the papers, you know, that he was playing with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker. The first time I saw John Mayall with Eric Clapton, like I said, one of their very first dates, Jack Bruce was playing bass. So I remember going to the Flamingo Club, which was an all-night club in Soho in London, and I used to kind of walk back home because, you know, by the time the shows were over, I didn't have a car or anything, so I was too young, I guess. But I went to see John Mayall at the Flamingo Club, and I was walking down the stairs, and I'm hearing this sound. I'm thinking, it's not John Mayall. You know, John Mayall was a very lighter, almost folky at times sound, you know, and the guitar player, I can't remember his name, had more sort of treble, thinner guitar sound. And now I'm hearing this quite heavy guitar sound in this band. And I walked in, and it was John Mayall, but it was a totally different lineup. It was Jack Bruce on bass, Eric on guitar. And of course, I was blown away. So that was, you know, follow them around, got in, you know, keeping my own thing going, of course, you know, playing with the band. I think by that time, I don't know what year that was. Was that 65? Was it with Mayall? 66. Then they put Cream together. I opened for that date for them, and then I was working, you know, fairly steadily through 66. Then, you know, getting established.
So let's talk about your idols. So a lot of the British blues bands were influenced by their idols, the Chicago guys and the Mississippi guys. Were you able to ever meet or play with your idols? How's that?
Yeah, sure. You know, of course, my biggest reason for me to be around was Muddy Waters, and really, Savoy Brown was supposed to be the British Muddy Waters band, and people said at the time we sounded exactly like the Muddy Waters band. We had the same lineup, you know, acoustic piano, harmonica, blah blah blah, and and then I did a show with. I've done a couple of shows once I was established in the 60s. It might have been the 70s. We did a show with Muddy Waters, and it was great. I've still got the photo that someone took at the time with me standing with Muddy. It was great. But then years and years later, Bob Margolin, who was in the band, must have been the 70s or early 70s, had said to me, Muddy was really upset because he was looking forward to playing that show, but he didn't think he played that good that night. And so I was very touched that Bob should tell me that, and think that, you know, how, you know, that Muddy was really up to do the show, you know, with, the Savoy Brown, the Muddy Waters show. So that was I'd never played with them that night, never got to play with Muddy, but then later on, a lot of the acts were playing smaller clubs. Angano's in New York City was a very small sort of Greenwich Village club, I think, or at least, you know, Manhattan club, and I played there many times. And people like Van Morrison would play there. And then one night, okay, having a senior moment here now. I was setting the stage for this, and I've forgotten the artist now that was playing there. And we got up to jam, and it was a fantastic night. Chris Yulden and I got up there, and I got up there on guitar, and Bobby Bland, and Chris and Bobby Bland, you know, swapped vocal things, and it was fantastic, you know. Chris held his own, of course. He was fantastic. So that was a great thing. And then later on, again, everybody was kind of playing the smaller venues. I had I was on the concert circuit, but then I would go to all the clubs, and one night, and a lot of the artists would play for a week, and as I did occasionally. And what in LA, Albert Collins was playing. So I saw him twice at this particular, this really was just a small bar, and got to talking to him a little bit. And then one particularly exciting night, Earl Hooker came along, and Earl Hooker started jamming with Albert Collins. And somehow or other, I got on stage and pushed myself into the mix, probably. And so I was jamming on stage with Earl Hooker and Albert Collins, and that was remarkable. And then going back, before I came to the States in the late 60s, I'd done a backed up Johnny Hooker for a UK tour in 1967. And even before that, 65, 66, I had done lots of dates backing up Champion Jack Dupree. Champion Jack Dupree was living in England at that time and married an English woman. And so we were on the same agency. And so they would send us out together. I would do the show with Savoy, and then Champion Jack would come on, and we'd back him up, and that was a lot of fun. Champion Jack was very down to earth, and he would give me lots of information. I remember playing Eel Pie Island, and we were both standing in the audience watching one of the other acts, and he said to me about the singer, "This guy won't last." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, he's not singing from his stomach. He's singing from his throat." And so as simple, as one might think blues artists are, like Champion Jack Dupree and so forth, they had all the correct way of doing the things. They knew how to correctly sing, they knew how to play the piano. They knew all the stuff that you need to know. It wasn't by accident. They were doing things the right way, and so Champion Jack Dupree was a really, really cool guy, and one day of course, he would smoke reefer, and he called it reefer, and he sang songs about that. I'd grown up, of course, listening to Champion Jack Dupree, and his wife came up to me one day and she said, "I don't know what he smokes this stuff. I don't know what it is, and all it does is make him go to sleep." And it was like, it was because really, weed was, wasn't exactly mainstream back in those days.
Yeah. So you backed him up. You backed Hooker up. Tell me a Hooker story.
Well, with Hooker, we the classic story is I at that point, again, we were fairly established in 67, and we would rent to rehearse. We would rent a London club in the afternoon. It wasn't too expensive. And I think it was the Ram Jam Club in Brixton that we had rented to rehearse with John. And he had flown in. My brother had met him at the airport, brought him to the rehearsal room. I was on stage with the band, we were messing around playing some stuff. And John came in and he said, "What am I doing here? What's this all about?" And I said, "John, we're here to rehearse." And he said, "I don't rehearse." And he turned around and walked out. So that was a learning experience for me. And then sometimes I think I had my amp. I don't think we had an amp. No, I could be making this up, but I don't think so. Certainly some of the dates this would have happened where we only had one amplifier, my amplifier. It might have been the whole tour, but again, I might be exaggerating. But certainly I know some of the dates we just had the one amplifier. So I went into one input and John went in the other input. and I would just try to get out of his way, you know, when he was comping and playing, and then if I had a solo, I would do something. Likewise himself. So it was fantastic because I had my amplifier, and here was John Lee Hooker, you know, John playing through that amplifier. So I could really sort of I could live everything he was doing, you know, and it taught me an awful lot. And the amazing thing was with him, he was, you know, because at that time it was 67, and yeah, of course you had the Animals, and they had done John Lee Hooker songs, and every, you know, he was, but he was still very dangerous type of guy, you know. This was this pre-Hendrix? It might have been. Like when Hendrix came on the scene, he was, you know, this dangerous guy, and you know, which is kind of what the blues sort of can be, right? You know, you can play that hand, and John wasn't, you know, trying to be, you know, edgy or anything, but he was. That's the nature of how he sang, you know, how he played guitar. You know, he wasn't playing guitar, you know, sweetly. He wasn't playing guitar with dexterity. He was just attacking that instrument, you know, with feeling, you know, and singing the same way. And I used to think, and we played all sorts of venues with him. We, you know, army bases, London hip clubs. We would play debutante balls. We would play, you name it. We would play, you know, we played a variety of gigs. We played Cambridge University or Oxford, one of those two, you know, one of those dinner party, afternoon party type things. And I would think to myself, I'd been, you know, because I was still inexperienced, I would think, we're going to die a death here. You know, he's going to come on and he's going to go, you know, I'm a crawling king snake, and people are going to look like, what the hell is going on? And, but he had a remarkable ability to capture any audience. You know, it could be, I think I may have lost you there. Hold on, let me bring you back. It could have been, you know, a high class, you know, audience. It could be a down and dirty, you know, it could be an army base, you know, where guys were just, you know, drinking and having a good time. It could be you know, a posh hip London club. You know, the music, you know, his ability to capture people's attention was remarkable. You know, he'd get everybody dancing. They just, you know, he had this amazing star power.
And you learned a lot from him as well.
Yes. Well, I did. And I'd learned it all when I was like 13 years old, because I'd have the records. I had Don't Turn Me From Your Door was one of my first John Lee Hooker records. And I would sit in my parents', you know, front room, because the front room was the place in the house that nobody used. You know, if the vicar, you know, if the vicar came around, you'd take him into the front room, you know, no, otherwise you'd never go in the front room. So I used to sneak in there. It was totally quiet, and I would play these John Lee Hooker records, and you know, it was really, I think it was the music that you know, taught me to play with emotion.
So let's go back to all the records that you've put out all these years. Well, like, there's a bunch of them that I used to play in the beginning when I first started doing radio, like A Step Further and Blue Matter and Looking In right here.
Yeah, you got the T-shirt. Yeah.
Street Corner Talking, Hellbound Train, Lion's Share, you name it. There were a ton of records from like 68 to 72 that you made. Right. You were very, very busy during that period of time.
Oh, incredibly busy, you know, and it was great. I was, it was all about music, you know. As the 70s came along, I started a family, and you know, life went, you know, went a slightly different direction. But certainly through the 60s and early 70s, it was music, and yeah, I had the golden touch there, and it was fantastic, you know.
A lot of lineup changes in that period too.
Well, yeah, it was a lot of lineup changes. I suppose looking back, I have no idea how I possibly managed it, but certainly I was born and blessed with a little too much energy probably. And so I was just able to channel that energy. I was young. I was very confident. And when there was a lineup change or somebody left or perhaps I, fired somebody or something, if something happened like that, invariably it was more like a change was going to come, for whatever reason. And when that change came, I didn't try to replace the person, whoever it was, whether it was a singer, whether it was whatever, drummer, what have you, with a clone. I didn't sort of say, okay, well, because that never worked for me. I tried that when John O'Leary, the harmonica player, first left, back in '66. I got a harmonica player and I thought, oh, that's what you do. But I quickly realized that's not what you do. You can't replace anybody like that. So very quickly, in that case, with John left, I got a guitar player in. And so from that point on, when there was a change in the lineups, and there often were, I would think out of the box and say, okay, this is an opportunity to go a different direction. Bring something new into the band.
And that was Chris. You had Chris and Lonesome Dave in the band right there in the beginning.
Yeah, well, that was 68. I think 68 when Chris joined. And we decided to make a vocalist change. Chris, I had seen sing with other bands. Great singer, and so he was brought into the band, and so it was the band that recorded the first album with just Chris singing, a change of, but that didn't last at all long, and I found myself just with myself and Chris, and
the next phase is an interesting one for me to ask you about.
Yeah, so it was just me and Chris, and then we spent probably months just with whoever, with revolving musicians, I suppose. We would trying to, that often has happened with me when you get a chemistry with a vocalist. Sometimes it's difficult to figure out who else, so for a few months there, we had lots of people in the band.
Yeah, I see you had some ex-Mayo people, Bob Bruning and Huey Flint for a short while.
Bob Bruning, yeah, he was the first Fleetwood Mac bass player, actually. And then he joined. It was great. Then Huey Flint, who had played with John Mayall, he joined. Both great guys. Loved them in the band. I can't remember how and why they left or what happened. I know that Savoy Brown was a family concern. My brother was managing me. I had made my brother my manager back in '65, and the idea was he would handle the business and I would handle the music and everything. Yeah. And so sometimes, he was a pretty hard businessman. So I think some of the musicians, and I never got involved in that side of it, so I never quite knew, I would, as far as I knew, oh, someone's leaving, but who knows whether it was a business thing at the back of it. I don't know. But Huey was great. We got on well together. Bob Browning was great. Got on great together. And, but there are different reasons. People get married. People want to do something else, having said there's business aspects and there's other aspects, personal aspects, but often there's not, everybody has their own walk to go. And I think that, I was very serious. I wanted to do something with Savoy Brown, and sometimes the musicians in the band, weren't taking it seriously, and that's never a good thing. And so sometimes that led to personnel changes. But anyway, it was Chris and myself for quite a while in '68. And then the band started to coalesce. Coalesce? Is that the word?
Coalesce.
And, Lonesome Dave Lonesome was I'd seen Lonesome in his previous bands. I knew him. He was a good friend of my brother's. I knew Lonesome's brother very well, and John. And so he was in the sort of family. And so one day I rang him up and said, do you want to join Savoy Brown? And he said, sure. When do we rehearse? And I did a John Lee Hooker. And I said, no, we're not rehearsing. I'm picking you up in 90 minutes and we're going to go to the first gig, which I did. And he never forgot that. He always used to tell me that story. I mean, I did forget it, but Dave didn't.
After Bob and Huey left, was an interesting, I was amazed when I saw who came in. Bill Bruford was briefly in the band with you, and Rivers Job.
Rivers Job was cool. And Bill Bruford was fantastic, but I think he was just too good for Savoy Brown. I just wanted a guy to play a shuffle, and of course Bill was very, very good drummer, but he really was too qualified at the time. So I said, look, Bill, it's not quite working out. And I'm never quite sure why it wasn't working out. I think he was just a little too technical, for the down and dirty boogie blues we were playing. And so I recall very, very plainly having a conversation with him, because he did ask me, why and what's going on, and I never really had a proper answer, because I'm not quite sure. We were all still learning all that kind of stuff. We were all still learning how to play shuffle. Yeah. So I couldn't quite vocalize what it was. Just didn't feel right. Of course, then Bill went on to become one of the greatest drummers in the world, and he was pretty good back then too.
And then Tony Stevens came in.
Yeah, Tony came in on bass, and Roger Earl on drums. And Roger came by. At times, it was, as it has been through my whole career, when I've had to put lineups together. It's sometimes very difficult to find musicians. Back in the day, in the 60s, we'd put an ad in the Melody Maker or Record Mirror, one of the music newspapers, weekly papers, and we would hold auditions, and which was like the most ridiculous thing you could possibly do, because 100 people would show up, an open audition, So I'd be on stage with the guys, and say with drummers, and we would audition a new drummer. And after just five drummers, your mind, you can't make a decision. But Roger came to one of those. Roger Earl came to one of those auditions, and he was fantastic. And so there was no, he was in via an open audition. And then Tony Stevens, he may have come from an ad that we put in the paper, but I really liked Tony. He was he was a steady guy. He was playing a Dan Electro bass, and he just seemed the kind of person that would be good in the band. He was a good musician, and I think that was very important at the time. You had to have good people in the band. You didn't want people that were going to rock the boat, or not so much rock the boat, but cause problems and so forth. You wanted people that were a little bit more loose, and which certainly Roger was, and Dave was a perfect person to have in a band. So that then became a very that became the band that then came to the United States.
And then, how long was that? How long were they with you? Do you remember?
They were in the band 68, 69, 70, 3 years.
And then they went off and became Foghat.
They became Foghat, and again eclipsed me in Savoy Brown. So apparently I keep getting eclipsed by people who are in the band.
yeah, but that's a good thing that, your musicians are moving on and doing stuff, because it gives you the notoriety of having those guys in your band.
I suppose I never thought. Actually, I never thought of that till you just brought that up. I've just been very happy. I'd rather people leave the band and do well than leave the band and go into obscurity. Because that's I want people to do well. So when Foghat did well, I loved it. I loved to see Dave doing so well, because Dave was and Roger and Tony, beautiful guys. So.
And then the next phase, I love the next phase. One of your opening bands, you took the whole band and they became part of your band, Chicken Shack.
Yeah, well, what happened? Oh, after it was actually when I had the split with Roger, Dave, and Tony, and they went off to form Foghat. At that point, it was like, now what am I going to do? And Stan Webb, who had the band Chicken Shack, fired his whole band because he wanted to go into a different direction. And so it was like, great. So I took the whole of Chicken Shack and into Savoy Brown, and added Dave Walker on vocals. And then I went in a different direction then. I went in more, I'd say in my head, I was moving into a more R&B direction. I was playing a Stratocaster. I wanted a different sound. I was trying to get away from the Guitar Hero stuff I had done previously.
Amazing. You had 3 former Fleetwood Mac alumni come through your band. David Walker was one too at one time.
Oh, that's right. After that, when you left Savoy Brown, you went to Fleetwood Mac, right?
Yeah.
So that Bill Bruford was the second. Who's the third person?
No. Huey Flint, Bob Bruning, and David Walker were the 3 that were in.
Right. Well, I don't think Huey Flint was.
No, he wasn't. No, Huey wasn't, but Bob was.
Bob was. Yeah.
Originally, he was one of the original.
Yeah, he was the first bass player. I think that was because John McVie, for one reason or another, couldn't join the band. And so Bob
Bruning, yeah.
Bob Bruning was the bass player. I don't know if that was temporary or what, but eventually, of course, John McVie was able to join the band. Yeah. And then Bob gave way, I suppose, is how it went.
And his wife, Christine, was in the Chicken Shack as well.
Yeah, Christine McVie was, Christine Perfect at the time.
Yep.
Yeah, was in Chicken Shack, and my brother managed Chicken Shack, and my brother managed Christine too when she went solo. So I think that's another reason why we were able to make the connection, and they were able to come into Savoy Brown, because my brother managed them, and he managed Stan as well. So when Stan went off to do a different thing, Harry already was already managing the Chicken Shack band. So, I think he said to me, look, they'd be great for you. So at his suggestion, I brought in the ex-Chicken Shack guys.
I got some more listener questions I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
How was it working with Mike Vernon?
Oh, it was fantastic. Mike, I mean, come on, Mike was great. He was, he was, we did I can't remember how many albums we did together. And then I started to, I was starting to grow up and starting to realize I wanted to do the producer myself. And that led to the Raw Sienna album, which I produced along with Chris Yulden. And so that was a split with Mike then, but I think we both have a lot of affection for one another. And let's face it, if it wasn't for Mike, there wouldn't be a Savoy Brown story probably, because Mike came down to see the band at the very early days, and we recorded for that Purdar Records, as I said earlier on, his like boutique label that he had. Then he recorded the Beano album for Decca, and then he took Savoy Brown into Decca, and we were the second band that recorded at Decca, for that time period with Mike. So he was great.
Yeah, he produced a lot of the great bands from England. Fleetwood Mac, you guys, everybody. Some of the some of the,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. He was the main guy. I didn't hear his name mentioned on some of these documentaries, and it's like, what the hell's going on here? You know, he was the glue there for everybody. Yeah.
Those Eddie Boyd records he did on
The
Blue
Eddie
Horizon
Boyd,
were great.
I still play those myself. Yeah.
Another question. Ready? Here's another one. Kim's quoted as saying Fillmore East was his favorite gig. Why?
Well, because it was a great old theater. It had the atmosphere. It was like a vaudeville theater. But what the main reason was, they had the big floodlights back then. You know, they had this big floodlight up in the what do they call that? The upper tier sitting area. They had a big floodlight up there, and I remember being on stage doing my solos, and that floodlight would hit you, and it was just the most amazing feeling. Because also I knew that my guitar playing, of course the band, but just talk about myself for a moment as a guitar player. I knew my guitar playing was being understood by the audience. And it's a terrific feeling when you know that, you know, you're pouring out your feelings through your instrument, and you know that it's hitting some hearts out there. So there was a twofold thing: that spotlight on me, making me feel like $100 million, you know, and then because it hit you on the solos, playing the solos, and knowing that this was an incredibly knowledgeable audience there that were understanding and with you all the way. And I was completely right, because I met so many people that were in that audience, you know, that have went on to careers in the music business, that they did know what was going on. They did understand it. And so there you go. That was it. It all just came together. The old theater, was it 2,000-3,000 people, or maybe less? It was just the perfect size. You do 2 shows a night. Bill Graham was great to work with. We built ourselves up from opening act to second on the bill to special guest star to headliner. You know, it was a microcosm of how you make it in the music biz, and all those aspects were there on stage. That spotlight hitting you, great knowledgeable audience. Well, you know, I mean, it was better than I won't say it, but it was better than a lot of things in life.
What was Bill Graham like? Did you ever get to meet him?
It was Oh yeah, he was fantastic. You know, he helped us develop. You know, he paved the way for us. You know, he ran from what I gather, what I can remember. I mean, I think he ran the Fillmore East, like, you know, with a pretty heavy hand. You know, you had to toe the line. You didn't when you break in microphones. You didn't when you're doing this, doing that. You know, you really had to watch your time. If you come off at 8 o'clock, you better come off at 8 o'clock. You know, and but I had no problems. You know, I've never had problems with authority or anything, so I had no problems with that. And Savoy Brown in itself at that point in time was like a little army. You know, we would you know, point us in the right direction. You know, go up that hill. We'd go up that hill. You know, we were all on the same page. You know, we were all very together. You know, so there was no problems to fit into the Bill Graham world. And like I say, I think that we were able to work with him. We were able to show to him that we were professionals. You know, we were able to show to him that we were not just as musicians, but as people. We were able to show him that he could rely on us, you know, and that we were a headlining act, you know. Of course, the people loved us and so forth, but, you know, we showed you we were a headline act. But had we had attitude, you know, had we been any other things, you know, I'm sure he would have passed. But like, you know, we were, you know, I think we showed to him that we were worthy of headlining.
Did you ever play the Fillmore West at all?
Yes, same thing happened there. But I think by the time we got to Fillmore West, we were headliners pretty much straight away, because we had, we'd already established New York City. So when we went to the Fillmore West, we were, Bill put us on as headliners there.
Wow. One more listener question for you. I got lots of them. They love this. Here's a question. He said that he's seen you play a Paul Reed Smith. Have you given up on the Gibson Les Paul, or do you do both? Do you play both?
No, I haven't. I think, actually, having said that, I think very recently I've given up on the Les Paul, because I've been at home now. I haven't done a gig for 14, 15 months. And so I'm playing in my studio. I play every day. And I often play as if I'm on stage. I keep myself fit. I keep my guitar playing as on top of it, and I play the Les Paul if I'm in my studio. But I've realized it's now way too heavy for me. So although I still love the aesthetic of a Les Paul, so now I've changed to a heritage guitar that which a friend of mine gifted me, which was very nice of him a couple of years ago. And I changed the pickups on it to some old Gibson pickups from the 1960s, 50s that I had. And that heritage is really working out for me. It's just that little bit lighter than the heavy Les Paul. And so I think that for this year, if you come and see a show, you'll see me play in the heritage, which looks to an untrained eye as if it's a Les Paul.
So let's go back to December 2019 when I last saw you. You were at the Bull Run here in Shirley, Massachusetts,
right?
And you were doing it previously, like a residency every December. You'd come in and bring the band Savoy Brown in and play.
Right.
And that was the last time I got to see you. By the way, I did send you that video.
Oh, did you? Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it wasn't Ain't Superstitious. It was another song. One that I had was too dark, and the sound was a little choppy.
Okay.
But this one, wait till you see this.
Okay.
It was a great recording of you that night. And then we were going to do this interview after that, but COVID hit and everything stopped. So thank God we were able to get reconvene and do this today.
Yeah, that was a bit of a shock, and I think it's starting to become really tiresome now, because I think at the very beginning, if you remember, what was it, March, April, we kind of closed down, and everybody was saying, oh, May, June, you'll be okay, and then July. And yet I was reading that the pandemic back in 1917, they didn't get back on their feet until two falls later, and that was in the back of mine. And sure enough, I'm not getting back on my feet, with gigs or anything until this coming fall here. So that's the same as back in 1917. But we had this hope as we were going along that, okay, it'll now be August and we'll get. So, of course, the whole last year was gone. And now flash forward to this year, and it's the similar thing. I had dates in January, February where they were postponed. And so now it doesn't look like I'll be getting going until, June, July, if I'm lucky. So, and then I'm happy to say that in the fall, it's looking very, very good. And then next year I have a tour of Germany, which looks very good. So I'm sure we'll get back to normalcy. But the hard thing is always hoping that it's going to change, next month. And it hasn't. And in reality, probably what I kind of understood in my heart was that it was going to be, September 2021 before we would get going. And that's exactly how it's playing out. But
And you had a little health scare we talked about yesterday.
well, I've had a couple of major health scares, in the last 5 years, and the last one was back in August, where I had a heart attack. Of all things, I had a major blocked artery. Was luckily didn't sort of put me 6 foot under, and they operated on me, and it's only now that I realize that was in August. So now, we're months and months away, but now I'm beginning to realize, wow, I'm feeling better. Because at the time they said, you're going to feel a lot better. And I'm not sure that it hit me at all. But the last month, I've been thinking, wow, I'm playing guitar very well, a lot of energy. And I suddenly realized, hey, it's catching up with me. Yeah, I think that, my blood's flowing better. And of course, I wasn't, when they were doing the surgery, the surgeon said to me, well, you're not the kind of person we see in here in this kind of thing. So I wasn't a poster child to have a heart attack, but it shows you that anybody can have one. And but I recovered from that, and I think I'm in better shape than I've been for years. When you saw me at the Bull Run back in 2019, you said I was tired after the show. And
yeah, you were wiped out completely.
For months prior to that, I was wiped out after the show. I'm sure that's because of a blocked artery was really was the reason for it. So now I'm unblocked
and ready to go.
I'm ready to go. I'm ready to rock.
And
with
you
my
have
heritage.
and right after that surgery, you put this out, your new record or the latest record.
Yeah, well, that's the latest. After this, well, I tell you what, there was a big change in me, I think, and I don't like to bring this up because I don't like to bring up. I never made it public at the time. I suppose I can now because it has some historical context. Plus, I've got through it. But I had cancer 5 years ago, and it was throat cancer. But I was given 90% chance of surviving. So I thought, that's fantastic odds when you have cancer, if someone's going to give you those, It was a very, very tough period. It was very painful. And but that was, now it's past 5 years. So I've been given the cured. After 5 years, they say you're cured, which is kind of nice. But I think the interesting thing, what Pat DeSalvo, bass player in the band, always says to me, and he's been with me 10 years, he says, when I had that operation, and they were very careful, robotic operation, not to go to my vocal cords, but he says, after that operation, my voice gained something. And I think he's right, but my voice gained a depth to it that it didn't have before. And certainly, when I had the cancer, I had within 2 months I did a gig. I was ready to go, not ready to go, but you've got fighting spirit, and that led to me doing the Witchy Feeling album for Roof Records, and that was, I think that was a very, very good record, and a lot of that I think was from the inspiration from going through a major health thing, that could certainly put an end to your life. So I think that really, from that point on, there's been a change in my vocals, plus in my realizing that time is short. So I did the Witchy Feeling record, then I did City Night, a high energy record, and now I've done Ain't Done Yet. And I think I'm going through this very good period, probably brought on by a very negative thing that turned into a positive. So I've had the two biggest things, health things that probably could happen to you, and so far, here I am.
And still doing great. That's
good.
Yeah,
I'm looking. Yeah, exactly. I'm looking forward to however long is left.
And you have some local dates coming up.
I'm sorry?
you have some local dates coming up in
Yeah,
August and
yeah,
September.
yeah. It's coming together. We have a nice tour actually in August, September. We do dates on the West Coast. Then we come back to the East Coast and we play Boston. We play New York City. We play we play some nice East Coast dates. So we've got I would say a good two and a half weeks there of catch up. So I'm doing the West Coast and the East Coast, playing some dates I've always played, and so that's it's very exciting to do that, because I actually haven't, with the Ain't Done Yet, which has done very well for me. I actually haven't promoted the record at all, because that came out. I recorded it in February of 2020 last year. Then the pandemic hit. Luckily, I had recorded it, so it was mixed and mastered. So we were able to release it in the summer, and that kept me going. Really, I think having the album out, people were buying it. People were interviewing me, and so I really felt, wow, I've got a career. Where I think had I not had that album, it would have been a really odd year, because now I'm not playing live. Now there's, I have no calling card, if you want to call it that, out there. So that album has really, really got me through this very hard period, because I haven't worked in let me see, what's February to February's 12. I mean, yeah, you're on 14 months.
Yeah, but it's funny that you say you haven't worked. You've worked your whole life. Look at every year you put out a record.
Well, true, and I'm working every day actually in my
Right.
studio. I've written the next album for next year already, and I'm working hard in the studio. I'm working hard behind. I'm very hard on myself.
I mean, I was looking at your discography, and it's like from 66 on, there's records almost every single year.
And
Just about.
sometimes there's two albums. Certainly in
Right.
1969 there were two albums, and so it's it's just been nice to be blessed with energy. I think that's been part of the family trait, and now, like I say, now that I'm at that very nice plateau, all my energy's coming back. So I'm very excited about performing again, to see what that means, in real time when I'm on that stage. Will in fact, I did do I tell a slight fib here, because last week we were in the studio and we did a live show for a pay-per-view that should be coming up in June. So we have done that one show together, and in the studio it was 1 hour, and I was really into it, 100% physically play. If I can't play the guitar physically, it's very difficult for me. And so, I was playing as physical as I could possibly play, and it was like very exciting. So I'm hoping that once we start on the road and doing gigs, that is going to carry on. I'll be able to not just play guitar, but play it with some physicality.
Well, I'm gonna put a little bug in George's ear at the Bull Run to see if we can get you back again.
Well, now you've mentioned, I'll tell my agent on Monday to make sure that we hopefully can get into Bull Run this year in December, because that's, as you say, that was always our annual thing.
One last question. Your new album, there's a song on here called Jaguar Car. And it's on, Jaguar is using it, correct?
No. How do you find that out? Are they using it?
Well, I saw a thing with the song online that they had, that song was being used. Yeah.
Wow, because that would be exciting. That news hasn't hit me yet. So, but yeah, it's a blues boogie. And writing about a Jaguar car is a little less cliche than writing about a red Cadillac, you know. And I think I started the song writing about a red Cadillac. I wanted to write about a car, and so it morphed from a Cadillac to a Jaguar. And my brother had a E-type Jag back in the '60s, so I'm very familiar with that.
Yeah, it
Car.
was. I think it was a Facebook post where I saw it, and I went, "Wow, how did
Oh,
that happen? How did that happen? That's interesting."
I don't know. I'm not sure that that's for real, but I'm going to follow it up and see what's going on there. Yeah.
So I'm gonna, when we're done with the interview, which I'm gonna close up right now, I just want to thank you very much for a long interview, and tell the people how they can find out about you, your merchandise, all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, the epicenter for Savoy Brown is the website, www.savoybrown.com. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. Also, we have a Facebook, Savoy Brown Facebook page that a friend of mine runs for me. He does a fantastic job. So, yeah, you can find us on all the social media and, of course, savoybrown.com. If you go to savoybrown.com, I imagine you can, from there, it'll take you to the other things. Yeah.
One last question I forgot to ask you, and there was a ton of questions and listener questions, and you name it. You've done solo work yourself over
Right.
the years. There's like a handful of solo albums you've done. You thinking ever about doing more of those, or non Savoy Brown records?
Well, the reason I did the solo thing was to develop my voice, to give myself a challenge. They're all acoustic because I wasn't a great acoustic player, so I wanted the challenge of playing acoustic. I wanted something that was an antidote to to run in a band and being who I am with Savoy Brown. So being Kim Simmonds, acoustic, solo, had all those elements. It was a challenge. It was a way for me to develop uh, differently. It was a change of pace from the band, all those things. Will I do another one? Yes, I keep wanting to do another one, but I have, I just don't want to repeat myself in it. It's always a possibility, but I stopped doing these solo acoustic shows. Uh, it's hard work when you're on stage, for one thing. Just yourself, I've got great admiration for comedians now that walk on stage. You have to really think on your feet. Very enjoyable. I love doing them. But it simply is easier for me to get up there with the band as I'm getting older and do what I'm more known for, of course, playing electric guitar. And so you never know. There might be a solo album or something down the line, but really I'm pretty much on this run, like I say, from a few years ago where I started. I'm on this run now where with the band, that's Pat DeSalvo on bass, Garnet Grimm on drums. I'm on this run where together where we're it's like I'm on a good run, playing well, writing well. Let's focus in on the band.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to play your CD now, all the way through.
Oh,
as
fantastic.
far as I can get before 6 o'clock.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I hope
You're
the
welcome.
listeners enjoy it.
And next time you're in town, I'm going to come see you. We'll chat again.
Yeah. Well, we have each other's info now, so keep
Yes,
in
we
touch.
do. And I'm going to send you some of those bands I was telling you about from England, the blues bands. You wanted me to send you some names that you
Be in
hadn't
touch
heard.
with the younger guys that I don't know about. Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for that.
much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. You're listening to 91.5 WUML Lowell. That was Kim Simmonds from the great Savoy Brown with me.